And first up today, let's talk about our douchebag, or rather our douchebags of the day. Honestly, there was a huge selection today, but where I'm gonna start is with this story out of New York, though in no way is it limited to New York. And I say that because prosecutors in Manhattan, New York have now said that 15 people are facing charges related to counterfeit COVID vaccine cards, with one of the most notable people being charged being 31-year-old New Jersey woman Jasmine Clifford, who is also known on Instagram as Anti-Vax Mom or 5-Star Jazzy, with prosecutors claiming that she sold over 250 forged cards over Instagram for $200 a pop. And to make matters worse, for $250 more, Clifford would allegedly have a friend who worked at a medical clinic fraudulently enter people into New York City's immunization database, with that friend being 27-year-old Nadeza Barkley, who allegedly did this for at least 10 people. And if this sounds familiar to you, it's because you've had everyday people like Michael from Tizzy Entertainment exposing this scheme on TikTok and reporting it to the authorities. So you did also have a spokesperson for the DA's office saying that Clifford and others were already under investigation since back in June. And as far as the main two involved here, you have Clifford and Barkley reportedly charged with offering a false instrument for filing in the 1st degree and conspiracy in the 5th degree, with Clifford additionally charged with criminal possession of a forged instrument in the 2nd degree, with prosecutors also making known that they've charged 13 individuals who purchased the cards, noting that they are all people who work in, quote, frontline and essential employee settings, including hospitals and nursing homes. Those absolute pieces of shit. Like, I know one of the main headlines today is that Illinois woman that tried to go to Hawaii. They had a fake vaccine card, people loving it because literally on the card they spelled Moderna wrong. And yeah, fuck her. Fuck Chloe. I have to imagine that if hell exists, there has to be a special place for people that are working in nursing homes faking COVID vaccinations. Are you talking about people working with the immunocompromised, the elderly, the people that we're most trying to protect from this? I'm not saying I'd do it, but if you got hit in the face with a baseball bat, I don't know if I'd shed a tear. And then we should definitely talk about the situation and the news surrounding the death of Elijah McClain. If you're not familiar, he was a 23-year-old black man. He died back in 2019. This after reports explain an investigation found that Aurora police had no legal basis to stop McClain, with the officers putting McClain in a chokehold, which actually later led to state lawmakers banning law enforcement from using that restraint technique, with paramedics in the specific instance also reportedly injecting him with 500 milligrams of ketamine, and all of that before he suffered cardiac arrest and was eventually declared brain dead. But ultimately, all of that brings us to the big news today, because a Colorado grand jury has now returned a 32-count indictment against the police officers and paramedics, with the state's attorney general announcing today that 3 officers and 2 paramedics have been charged with manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide, as well as a number of assault charges. And a lot of people have been waiting a long time for this to happen. This notably happening after, as Axios notes, after the local district attorney reviewed the case and determined that no charges could be filed against the police or paramedics. But then about 14 months ago, Colorado Governor Jared Polis called for the state attorney general Phil Weiser to investigate the death and appointed Weiser as a special prosecutor. So what's happening with the grand jury, it's a culmination of what we've seen over the past year, but Weiser does appear to be kind of trying to put limits on expectations, saying, make no mistake, we recognize that this case will be difficult to prosecute. These types of cases always are. And on the other side of this, you have the Aurora Police Association's board of directors issuing a statement saying that its officers did nothing wrong and argue that there is no evidence that APD officers caused his death. And while all of this is happening, and remember there are a number of charges that I didn't even get into, there's also a separate investigation into the Aurora Police and Fire Department's practices that's ongoing. So a situation that is definitely going to make sense to track and keep our eyes on. And then let's talk about 2 absolutely massive pieces of news coming out of Texas involving restrictions and bans, though an important note here is it's not just going to be a Texas issue. And so where I want to start is that the most restrictive abortion law in America has now gone into effect today in Texas after the Supreme Court did not act on a request to block the policy by a midnight deadline. The law, which bans nearly all abortions after 6 weeks, notably before many people even know they're pregnant, also does not include exceptions for incest or rape. It also effectively ends Roe v. Wade protections in the state, going against Supreme Court precedents on the matter. Previously, the Supreme Court has forbidden states from banning abortions before fetal viability, the point where fetuses can live outside the womb, which is usually between 22 and 24 weeks, which is why you had providers asking the Supreme Court to block the law earlier this week, saying in the application that it would prohibit nearly all abortions in the state, arguing that the policy will, quote, immediately and catastrophically reduce abortion access in Texas, barring care for at least 85% of Texas abortion patients, those who are 6 weeks pregnant or greater, and likely forcing many abortion clinics ultimately to close. And beyond that, this law is also unprecedented because it includes a provision that allows private citizens to sue anyone else who helps someone obtain an abortion after 6 weeks. So that not only includes doctors, clinic staff, and counselors, but also those who help pay for the procedure, and even Uber drivers who took the patient to the clinic. And reportedly, the citizens who filed those lawsuits don't even need to have a connection to the defendant or prove any personal injury, and they're entitled to $10,000 in their legal fees if they win. Meanwhile, the defendants who win are not entitled to legal fees. And it turns out that provision specifically is incredibly significant for a number of reasons, including that it makes it harder for the entire law to be challenged in court, right? Well, 6-week abortion bans in other states have been blocked time and time again by federal judges. The lawsuits that were able to stop those laws from going into effect were filed against the government officials who would be enforcing them on the grounds that they were violating people's constitutionally protected rights. But the Texas law actually bars state officials from enforcing the ban and only allows these random citizens to sue providers or anyone else who aids and abets those seeking abortions after 6 weeks. Now, notably here, the Supreme Court or lower federal courts could still issue a stay on the law, thus halting enforcement, and in the meantime you have abortion rights groups saying that they'll keep fighting it. But regardless, experts say that the Supreme Court's decision not to rule on this question just yet is almost certainly going to inspire other states to write copycat bills. But also, beyond the groups challenging this new law in court, regular citizens have also begun pushing back. I mean, already we're seeing reports of people trolling a tip line set up by anti-abortion activists to report people who got an abortion after 6 weeks, with tons of people just flooding the website prolifewhistleblower.com with fake claims as well as Shrek porn and other memes. So I imagine for that tactic to be effective, people actually have to be consistent, keep up with it rather than being a one-time thing. Meanwhile, you have pro-choice groups also organizing protests against the law in Texas. Yeah, ultimately, for now, we're gonna have to wait to see what happens with this law. And I mean, as we've talked about for years now, especially with these new Supreme Court judges, this always seemed to be the road that we were going to go down. But for now, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, I'll pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts on this? Also, in other news, the 6-week abortion ban is not the only conservative agenda item that's going into effect in the state today. In fact, according to reports, exactly 666 laws are becoming effective as of today. Some of which you could say have been pushed through because people praise false idols. And that goes beyond the laws taking effect today, right? In addition to all of that, yesterday, both chambers of the Texas state legislature passed the elections bill that will impose incredibly restrictive voting rules. And despite the efforts of Democrats in the state, which at one point even included fleeing the state, the bill, as of recording, is on Greg Abbott's desk, and we should expect it to be signed very soon. And among other things, this new law will ban drive-through and 24-hour voting, both of which are very popular in Democratic strongholds of Harris County and disproportionately used by voters of color. Also, it places several limits on mail-in voting, including establishing strict new ID requirements for voting by mail and making it a felony for election officials to send out unsolicited ballots to voters. It also creates penalties for those who help people register to vote or cast a ballot, a move the critics say will make it harder for people who have disabilities or need translation help to vote. And it vastly expands the power of partisan poll watchers while creating new criminal and civil penalties for poll workers. Now, as far as what happens next, Democrats in the Texas legislature say that they plan to take legal action against the new law, but for now, the state joins at least 17 other states that have imposed new election restrictions in the aftermath of Trump's 2020 loss.